can. Oh, I get some paint up on our driveway.
Well, I think we're gonna get started here soon, folks. So thank you all for coming. My name is Caroline. I am a naturalist at Chik-Wauk. It's my second season here, so I'm glad to see some familiar faces in the crowd for those I've met before. Before we start, I did want to give a quick shout out to Visit Cook County and the Gunflint Trail Association. Their support allows us to host all of the speakers that we have all summer and into the fall. So if you do want to see what other talks we have coming up, you can check out on our website. Next week on Sunday, right here at the Nature Center, we have someone from Cook County, Tia, is coming to tell us about invasive species. So that should be a fun one. That's happening next week. But this week we have Maddi Nistler joining us from the National Loon Center. This is her second year working at the National Loon Center, and she does outreach all around the state of Minnesota. And I'm actually fortunate enough that this is my second talk I will be going to with her, so I'm very excited for round two. So without further ado, we can welcome Maddi. You go where you want.
Oh my gosh, I'm just trying to find myself.
Anywhere you want.
Well, thank you everyone for allowing me to be here. This is super, super cool. I would have to say this is by far the farthest I have traveled in my time at the Loon Center to a presentation or a program of any kind. Before this, the record was Faribault, all the way down in southern Minnesota. This is way better than Faribault. I'm just going to say that. So good work with that. But yes, my name is Maddi. I've been working at the National Loon Center for 2 years now. This is actually coming up on the end of my second GreenCorps term. Is anyone familiar with GreenCorps at all? Okay, GreenCorps is an AmeriCorps program. You're familiar with AmeriCorps at least? Okay, hopefully. It's a little complicated because it was an AmeriCorps program, and then for a little while it wasn't. And then as of like Tuesday, it was again. So we're gonna leave it be. I'm not gonna jinx it, but it is an AmeriCorps program, so there are Green Corps members serving throughout the state of Minnesota. There's, I think, about 58 of us this season. It's an 11-month service term, and you all go, well, I say you, the members all go to different host sites across the state, whether it's a state agency or a city or a county, tribal government, a school, a nonprofit. I like to say that my host site is probably the best host site that I could have picked. There's other folks working on awesome environmental projects down in the cities, electric vehicles and waste management and things like that. All super cool and very important stuff, but you can't beat loons, right? So super happy that I ended up where I am. After my second GreenCorps term ends in August, I'm going to roll over into a permanent position with the Loon Center in programs and outreach, continuing my traveling across the state and seeing what other corners of the state I can find myself in. This is definitely a new experience for me, being up at Chik-Wauk, so thank you again for allowing me to be here. Who's been to the Loon Center? Anyone?
Where is it right now?
Ooh, I will tell you. I will tell you. I just wanted to see if anyone knew where it was to begin with. Did anyone know that it existed before now?
No. Yes.
A couple of folks. Okay, interesting. Has anyone been to the Bear Center or the Wolf Center? Or the Eagle Center? Or the Owl Center? That's the fourth one. So the Loon Center is basically like the rest of those wildlife centers. The Loon Center is the 5th major wildlife center in Minnesota. We are a little bit behind everyone else. We were founded in 2016. A group of community members came together. I won't tell you what community yet. Keep you guessing. A group of community members came together and they said, what could make our city, our town more connected? How can we feel more connected to nature, to each other? How can we stimulate the economy in our small northern town? And they said, we need a Loon Center. And here it is. So that's your little teaser about the Loon Center. I think I have about an hour or so. I will try not to ramble for too long. If you have questions, please feel free to throw them at me while I'm talking. Raise your hand, throw something at me, do what you got to do. I'm pretty informal, so don't worry about interrupting. I have a couple of fun facts about the bird, obviously, because loons are really, really awesome, and I want you to love them as much as we do. So lots of fun facts, and then also a lot of stuff about stewardship, because loons are a very sensitive species in Minnesota, and in the entire nation and the continent, right? So lots of tips and tricks about how to keep our state bird in our state, make sure that we can enjoy the loons for generations to come. They've been around for a long, long time. We want them to stay here for a long, long time. So lots of stuff about that. And it sounds like you guys up in this area have a monitoring program for loons already. True? I see nods. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to talk about some other cool community citizen science projects that you can get involved with. Really awesome that you guys have started your own. That's amazing. But there are some others in the state that maybe you're not aware of, or maybe you can connect your project with and just have a greater collection of data. So I'll talk about that as well. So the Loon Center. This is not a real photo. This is a rendering. This building does not exist yet. This building will eventually exist in Crosslake, Minnesota. Has anyone been to Crosslake? Heard of Crosslake? It's about half an hour north of Brainerd, if that helps. Right in the heart of cabin country, there's loons everywhere on every single lake. Very much cabin lakes. When you think of Minnesota, that's what you think of, basically, right? So this building eventually will be in Crosslake, Minnesota. I think I have a map, eventually. There it is. I'll go with this first. We're all the way up here. Wow, look how far I drove. That's a long way to go. That's awesome. Yeah, so right here in kind of the central northern Minnesota. I don't know. People say this is northern Minnesota, but I think it's not because I live up here, which is actually northern Minnesota. So people get mad when I say it's central, and I'm like, whatever. So this is where the Loon Center is. I'll go back a couple of slides to tell you a little bit more about the center and what we do there. As I said, we were started in 2016 by a group of community members. They were like, we need something special in Crosslake. Not that Crosslake isn't special already, but we need something, not a tourist attraction, but more like a community, something that the community can be drawn to, right? And stimulate the economy and be a tourist attraction as well. But something that is meaningful to the community and meaningful to our environment. What better thing to choose than loons to do that work? So at the Loon Center, once again, I don't know if I said this, but once again, we are a nonprofit. We are not attached to the state in any way. We're not part of the DNR. We're not part of any other loon research agency. We are our own thing. We are the National Loon Center. There are other loon centers, loon advocacy groups in other parts of the country. Over in the northeastern states like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, we do have like the Loon Preservation Committee, the Adirondack Loon Center, things like that. But we are the National Loon Center, which is pretty special if I do say so myself. But yeah, we're not connected to the state. We are our own thing. We are a nonprofit, so we don't receive state funding. Most of our funding comes from private donations, a lot of environmental grants. This last voting cycle, we voted on the lottery dollars going to the Environmental Resources Trust Fund. We receive money from that as well. So keep on gambling, that goes to us. I didn't just say that, don't worry. Yes, so we, at the Loon Center, we focus mainly on, we do a lot of work with trying to get donations, obviously, but most of the work that we do, that I do, focuses on these three things: research, education, and conservation. This is, I need to find a better example because this is actually a dead loon in a trash bag. Not a super fun example of research, but very important research nonetheless. We are involved in a study with the University of Minnesota down in the Twin Cities. We bring all loon mortalities that we collect down to the U of M, and they do necropsies. They perform different tests, I suppose, like toxicology reports, and they figure out like cause of death and things like that. And then they report back to us and they tell us, how old the loon was, what the cause of death was, anything else that we may need to know, where that loon originally came from, any other history. And that allows us to figure out kind of what the genetic makeup is of the loons in our area, if they're coming from different parts of northern Minnesota or northern America. It also gives us an idea of what is harming the loons in our area. If we get a high amount of, let's say, boat strikes, for example, then we know that's something that we need to focus on in our community. We need to figure out how to get to folks about loon safe boating, things like that. So we do a lot of research. We also eventually will have more of a research team at the Loon Center once the new building is constructed. We'll do like loon banding, which I'll discuss pretty soon. We'll do more population studies, things like that. We'll work a little bit closer with the DNR. We work pretty closely with them in their loon restoration project. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. Maybe, no. At least the DNR, hopefully. Yes, okay, great. So eventually we will have more of a robust research program, which will be really awesome. And then education. So I am not the researcher, I am not a scientist. I am a naturalist at heart, but I do not do the counts, the lab, I don't do that stuff. I take all the research and I condense it and then I spit it back out to you guys. That's my job. And then of course, conservation. These all kind of go hand in hand. We also participate in the loon nest, artificial loon nest studies. We do our population studies and everything like that, and that helps us contribute to, again, education and then thus conservation. So helping others figure out in their lives what they can do to also contribute to these things as well. Any questions about the Loon Center? Oh, I suppose I should tell you when that's opening. So right now, I don't know if I have, that's an okay picture. Right now we do have a small temporary location. We have kind of a visitor center slash office slash everything else basically. That is located in Crosslake Town Square. If you've ever been to Crosslake, it's a little shopping center. Super easy to miss, but that's okay because eventually, as I said, we're gonna have this wonderful building. We broke ground 3 weeks ago already. It's been a long time coming, so we're very excited that that progress is being made. The building should be up and running by, well, I shouldn't say by, as early as fall of 2026, because you know how construction goes. Could be 12 to 18 months, but we're hoping for fall of 2026 to have visitors ready to come in and see us. So 3 stories, 15,000 square feet. If you've been, like I said, to the Wolf Center, Bear Center, Eagle Center, Owl Center, that's the 4th one. It'll be very similar to those, but all about loons. We can't have live loons in captivity because of their special relationship with water. They don't do well under human care. So we can't have live loons in the center, but we'll make up for it with cool exhibits and technology and all that cool stuff. So, questions about the Loon Center before I move on to the actual loons?
Open year round?
Yes, we will be open year round. That is one of the other things that Crosslake is super excited about, is having something that brings people all year long. Because we can't always count on fishing in the summer and boating in the summer. Well, you can count on boating in the summer basically every year. But the snow activities like snowmobiling and things like that, you can't always count on that. So it's going to be great to have something year round to bring folks in.
Really gonna have a loon session. Awesome.
It won't look like that. That looks like the Bean in Chicago. But it doesn't even look like a loon, to be quite honest with you. That is our computer generated statue. I do see you have a Minnesota United shirt on. You know the big loon in St. Paul? We're hoping to get something that looks kind of like that. We haven't contracted an artist or anything yet. We don't have a plan for sure, but we're hoping that it'll look something like the Minnesota United loon. So, very cool. Okay, let's dive right into loons. Ha, pun intended. So the common loon. That is what we know them as here in Minnesota. In other parts of the world, believe it or not, there are loons over in Europe. Some parts of Asia, really, really northern parts of Asia, but some parts of Europe, they call them the Great Northern Diver. That's a mouthful, so we just call them loons because that makes sense. It doesn't make sense, I don't know, because loon comes from a Scandinavian word, so I don't know where that came from. We're on track for it, it's fine. But that Scandinavian word means clumsy, which does track. Loons, if you have been around them, if you have seen them on the water, very graceful. If you have seen them outside of the water, they are not very graceful. So that makes sense. But most of the time, you will see loons in those northern freshwater lakes, like up here. I'll talk a little bit about habitat in the next slide, I think. One fun fact that I do want to point out: loons have been around for 55 million years. which is insane. That is one of the longest lived, if not the longest lived birds in Minnesota, in the United States, possibly in the world. That's a very, very old bird, and they haven't changed very much. And I will tell you a little bit about that very soon. So just big picture stuff in Minnesota. Here's a little cutout. This is not super accurate at this point, I would think. Remember when I said I went down to Faribault and I asked them if this is quite as accurate as we thought it was, and they said that's got to be an old map because we haven't had loons down here in 20, 30 years. So I would say at this point, this little orange color should dip down about right here, right about the Twin Cities, I would say. But generally, this is where the loons are in that orangish, rusty color that you see here. Like I said, very, very northern. They like it a lot colder than many other water birds. So they're living mostly in the northern parts of the state, and of course Canada and Alaska. You see the northeastern states have a good population as well. You see a random little dot right there in the Yellowstone National Park. There are some loons out there, believe it or not. We are working on trying to get some research out there and see what those loons are doing, why they live, where they live there. In Minnesota, we do have 12,000 common loons, which is, in the grand scheme of things, quite a lot of loons, considering that, or not a lot of loons, depending on how you look at it, considering that there's 500,000 loons in the entire North American continent. So we only have 2%. Of all the loons in the continent, we only have 2%. If you were to look at this map, this is audience participation time, what state would you guess has the most common loons?
Maine.
Maine?
Oh, Alaska, sorry.
Alaska by far has the most common
forgot.
loons. Everyone always forgets about Alaska. It's not, I mean, when I ask that question without a map, everyone's always like, oh, Michigan, Wisconsin. Nope. It's always Alaska. They have way more land mass than we do. Minnesota is pretty cool because we're number 2. We have the second most common loons. Wisconsin only has like 4,000, so take that, Wisconsin. A little bit about migration. This is not super prevalent to what's happening right now, but still important because unfortunately it is coming. It's coming pretty soon when the weather up here starts to get a little bit chillier. So our loons in Minnesota here, you'll see in that yellowish color, they follow the Mississippi Flyway all the way down to the Gulf here. They typically stay within a couple of miles of the coast, usually around the Florida coast, maybe Louisiana, kind of that area there. Some of them, depending on how adventurous they are, sometimes they'll go around the Panhandle and go up the Atlantic coast there. But most of the time they're following that Mississippi Flyway all the way down to the Gulf there. Couple of interesting little tidbits about migration. I think I want to talk about those later, so I will just leave you hanging there for now. One other thing, so this is, when they follow the Mississippi, they go to saltwater. But sometimes they don't go to saltwater. Sometimes they go to freshwater. There is a lake down in South Carolina called Lake Chillicothe. It is a man-made reservoir, and loons have been wintering there for longer than we previously thought. We have just recently started a kind of a, I guess it's a research program. Every winter we send our biologists down there and some others to go see what the loons are doing down there. It can be pretty fun because the loons behave a little bit differently than they do on saltwater, and sometimes you get to see other types of loons, which I will discuss very shortly. But loons don't always go to saltwater. Loons, here's my other fun fact. I have lots of fun facts, I'm full of them. But one cool thing is loons are one of the only, if not the only bird that has a salt gland. So behind their nose, they have a little gland that they can turn on and off. In freshwater, they don't have it on. And then when they go down to saltwater, they turn it on and they can filter the salt as they're swimming. Kind of like gills, but not quite functioning the same. It's very interesting. I think that's cool.
Do they sneeze the salt out when they're using the plant?
I don't know if sneeze is
well, like,
I mean, maybe sneeze. I guess I don't know. Something like that. Yeah, it filters out the salt. So the water itself goes a different direction than the salt does, so that they can still, they don't have gills, but they can kind of breathe underwater a little bit. They can hold their breath for like 5 minutes. So they're doing something with that water when they're down there. I don't know scientifically. That's a question for our researchers. Remember, I just spit out the information. That is a great question, though. I'll have to check if the loons sneeze out the salt. Interesting. So like I said in the previous slide, there are sometimes other species of loons. We do have 5 total. So the common loon is obviously the most common. That's the one that we'll find here in Minnesota and in most of Canada and Alaska. But there are other species of loons. These guys live even further north than our common loons. They don't exist here in Minnesota. If you see one of these loons in Minnesota, that's pretty special because they are not supposed to be here. We did have a red-throated loon down in kind of in the Brainerd area on Gull Lake, if anyone knows where that is. Last summer actually, so that was pretty cool. We got to see something a little bit different. We don't normally see those guys there. I don't know why he decided he wanted to live there for the summer, but he did. Just kind of hung out by himself, a little bit of a loner, very interesting. We also had an interesting story a couple years ago with the yellow-billed loon. That is the most rare of all the 5 species. And we had a yellow-billed loon end up in Las Vegas, of all places. He was migrating and he got blown off course on his way down to the Pacific. And he ended up in one of the fountains on the Strip, of all places. How that happened, I have no idea. But it was pretty cool because there was like a long-time birder that found him. And she was like, this is the coolest thing ever because I've never seen a yellow-billed loon. So that's pretty cool.
Where's their main? So they Canada then, or where do they?
Yes, I don't believe I have a map for those guys, but if we go back to this map. So the rest of those loons, I'll try to draw it here with my little laser. They live way up in the northernmost parts of Canada. Okay. The common loons like it pretty cold, but these guys like it even colder. So they're going to be way, way up there.
What's the blue on that map? Did you go back there?
Oh, sure. The blue is kind of their the non-breeding range, so where they winter. So in the wintering months, when it's cold up here and the lakes are frozen, they have to go down to the Gulf. So like I said, they typically stay within a few miles of the coast. So that blue outline is kind of where all the loons are going during the winter time.
So some loons are staying north along the coast?
Yes, so these loons, right up here, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yep, so these loons are actually from kind of the northeastern states. They just hop over to the Atlantic. They don't have to go real far. Why our loons decide to go all the way down to the Gulf, I don't know.
They're stronger.
They're stronger. They like margaritas. I'm not really sure. These guys like crustaceans. But yeah, and then in Alaska, you have these guys up here that just hop over to the Pacific too. So they just go to whatever body of water is closest.
Do they go to the same one or do they migrate to different? Do you know?
In the winter?
Yeah.
Yep, typically they will stay in their little spot. I mean, sometimes they will, like I said, they'll venture kind of around, I don't know, within the same.
Like the ones in Minnesota, the common loon.
Oh, you're saying like if our Minnesota
You
Minnesota
said they
loons
go to
decided to go
Florida
over
or
here.
Louisiana. Do they ever go to?
Occasionally. I mean, we don't do as many like GPS migration studies as we once did. It's really stressful for a loon to be inserted with a GPS tracker because you can't just put it on their tag or anything. Like you have to surgically insert it. So we don't do that anymore. But when we did find that occasionally loons will go over here. But most of them are going down to the Florida area. That's a good question. Okay. By far the best slide that I have here. We can't talk about loons without hearing what they sound like, so I'm going to go ahead and play those. I will tell you what they mean, and then I will play them, so if you have questions, then we'll do that. So the first one, this is their short distance call, the hoot. Super quiet, super small, it's adorable. If you hear it on the lake, it makes your whole day. It's so cute. This is when the parents are kind of communicating with the chicks, kind of keeping the kiddos in line. Where's my mouse go? There it is. So here's the hoot. Adorable. So cute. The second one is the opposite. This one is their long distance call. So this is that long mournful call that you hear usually in the middle of the night. Can't wait to hear that tonight because I don't live on a lake most of the time, but I'm staying up here tonight and I'm so excited to hear it. This is how they communicate over long distances. So oftentimes the pairs will separate at night. One will go off and fish maybe on the other side of the lake or on a different lake, on a neighboring lake. And this is just how they say like, hey, I'm here, I'm alive, how are you doing? And they'll answer back and forth. Can't get sick of that one. This third one, if I can find my mouse, this one is called the tremolo. This is kind of like the one that sounds like laughter. The tremolo is more of their signal alarm. So this is when maybe an eagle is flying overhead, maybe a boat is getting too close. This is how they tell the other loons, hey, there's something around that's making me kind of uncomfortable. Just want to let you know about that. Usually it's just to the other loons. It's not necessarily to whatever is making them uncomfortable. It's to tell the other loons how they're feeling. I keep losing my mouse. There it is. That's a good one. I like that one. And then finally here, this fourth one is kind of unique because only the males can make the yodel call. This is more their territorial defense call. If they are trying to establish their territory, this is how they tell the other males, hey, this is my spot. If you try to come into my territory, we're gonna have some words, we're gonna have to fight. The females physically cannot make this call. Their voice box does not allow them to make the yodel. Some other calls in there. There sounds like some kind of kerfuffle happening with all the different loons. Can anyone make a loon call? No?
I have one at home.
But can you do like I'm not going to even attempt, like
I have
the
a
little
thing
whistle?
that's like a big disc with strings and it mimics some of the calls.
That's how I do it. I cheat. I got to use that thing.
I can try.
Oh, go for
Let's
it.
hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Ooh, a sleepy
I
loon.
can't change that.
He's waking up. I love that. It's always fun asking people if they can do it because sometimes you never know. People might not want to do it, but if they get called out, then they'll do it. So it's kind of fun. Oh, it's going to play well again. Hold on. Okay, so a little bit about what we're seeing right now. So going through the season when the loons are here, typically April and May is when they're returning. It could vary a little bit depending on the location in the state, you know, how far north you are. Up here, it may be closer to May. Typically in Crosslake, we see the loons return late April, depending, again, on ice out. But the males will return first. They will come back and they will try to find their old nesting site. They try to come back to the same site that they've previously been at, and try to establish that as early as possible so that younger males don't come in and try to take it over. And then, of course, the females will come back and they'll do their little show, and the females will come back to them. Pop quiz: do loons mate for life? Yes or no? Who thinks they do?
Yes, yes.
Who thinks they do not? Who has no idea? I love it. You're half right if you said any of those. Loons will try to stay together for life if they can. If they encounter some kind of threat and one of the loons doesn't make it, the other loon has no issue finding a different loon. If they have mated with the same loon for several years and they don't have chicks, if the nest fails or if the chicks never hatch, or if they continually experience some kind of predation or threat to the chicks, they may find another pair member that way. Sometimes, it's a little scandalous, but sometimes what the loons do, if there's two pairs on a lake that are experiencing the same thing and they can't have a successful nest, they might switch and see if that makes a difference, because sometimes it does, you never know. But here's your party fact now: loons do not mate for life. No mating for life for the loons. Okay, and then May through September, did I go through this? Yeah, I did. May through September is the formal nesting season, as we call it. So the males will return, they'll establish the territory, and then the females will return. Usually around May to June is when they are actually building the nest and incubating the eggs. So the eggs are laid sometimes as early as the first couple of weeks of May. That's pretty early. Usually, for us at least, it's around the last week of May, first week of June. And then it's a 28-day incubation period, and then when they hatch, I have pictures of the cute little fuzzy chicks. They're so cute. But where they're nesting is usually a key key topic that a lot of people are asking about, especially for monitoring purposes. When the chicks hatch, you want to know where to find them. So typically, the loons are nesting on a more natural shoreline. They don't prefer the rocky shores, with riprap or sand beaches or anything like that. They like the cover. They like having all that vegetation to build their nests and to keep protected. Yes, question?
Do we have a notion of how they locate, if they migrate up to 1,000 miles or more? How do they find the specific spot? Do we have an idea?
Your guess is as good as mine. That is something that I don't think we are smart enough to figure out yet. The same with any bird that migrates, whether it's a songbird or an eagle or a loon. Our best guess is that they have kind of like an internal magnet that they can figure out north and south, right? And then they follow the weather patterns, they follow what they know is familiar. How the juveniles, on the other hand, how they know where to come back to, I don't know. If another naturalist in the room has a better idea than me, I would love to hear that proposal because I have no idea. That is a wonderful question though. It's pretty impressive. So when they do return, again, this is kind of where they're going to be nesting. Sometimes they will find a little floating island of peat moss. That could be advantageous because they don't have to deal with any mammalian predators like they would on the shoreline, but then you're out in the middle of the open, you're susceptible to other predators like eagles. The wave action could be detrimental, so maybe they know something that we don't, but it could be, if I were a loon, I would choose a spot like this. I did go onto the Googles and I took a little screenshot of the lake you guys have right out here, and I made some guesses as to where I would find loon nests if I were to go on this lake for the first time. They like these really protected bays. They like kind of structure that juts out into the lake, something that's going to protect them from the wave action if there's a lot of boat activity on the water. These little bays are going to be really good. Oh, my square moved. It was right there, I promise. This island right here, again, this square moved too, I don't know what happened. But this island would be a good area too, if it's pretty protected from the waves coming from one direction or another. That's typically where you're going to find the loons. And again, on a really large, clear, deep lake. You won't find a loon on a little pond like this. You would find them on something much larger. A little bit about artificial nesting platforms. Does anyone have experience with an artificial nesting platform? Right here, right outside. Excellent. Anyone have on their own lake? Maybe a lake association? No? Okay, interesting. I suppose up here you probably don't have as many issues with having to create artificial nesting platforms, right? I would think so. In Brainerd, as you can imagine, that is a problem. We use these, we try to use them as sparingly as possible because this is just a way for us to augment the loss of habitat. As you can imagine, in Brainerd, the cabins and the lake houses and the resorts and such are pretty detrimental for the nesting habitat. So oftentimes what we have to do, and of course you have things like water fluctuation, predation and things like that also contribute. But typically they will look something like this. We will put out a floating platform that's attached to a couple of cinder blocks that just sit on the lake bed, and that helps with water levels. It can float up and down. Sometimes you'll see it has some kind of avian guard on it to keep the eagles and the other birds off of it. But most of the time we try to mimic what the natural site would look like, just on something that looks a little bit more like an island. Sometimes that can be helpful in the cases where loons don't have a natural site to nest on, but other times that could be harmful because if you introduce an ANP to a lake that already has enough nesting sites, we don't want to pull the loons away from their natural sites. We want them to nest naturally without human intervention. We don't want to help them out. I mean, we do if we have to, but we don't want them to depend on us, right? So we try not to introduce them as much as possible. Question?
Do you ever look at, if they're not fish, if there's enough food? Because I think at least for us on Poplar, people have said, or in the past, that, we don't have, they don't have enough. And our care that we have is going to be plenty that the lake can handle.
Yeah.
Has there been much research done on that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely consideration with not only the natural nesting sites on the shoreline, but also with food availability, shoreline or like the surface area of the lake, whether there's even enough space for that many loon pairs to exist on that particular lake. Typically, it depends on food availability, whether there's enough fish to sustain. Usually, a loon pair will need about 60 to 120 acres. Again, depending on the lake. If it's a pretty densely populated lake with fish, it can be a little bit smaller. If it's a really large lake that doesn't have a lot of fish, they may need that entire lake, right? Yeah, so that definitely depends. And we don't want to introduce any competition that doesn't need to be there, right? We don't need other loons to come in, maybe a new pair, like a younger pair, and say, oh, there's a natural nesting, or there's not a natural nesting site, but there's an ANP. Just because all the other natural sites are taken doesn't mean I can't get in here. And then all of a sudden there's conflict that we've introduced. Great questions. Another thing that we kind of consider, it's got good sides and it's got bad sides, is the nesting signs. Particularly in central Minnesota, we have issues with it because we want to put the signs out because we want people to be aware. We want people to stay away from the loon when they're on the boat, when they're on the kayak. But if you put a sign out there, is that just going to draw people to the nest? They're like, oh, I'm going to go take a picture of the nest. I'm going to get right up to it. I don't care if there's a sign there. It just showed me where it is. So it depends. It really depends on your situation. But it's always an option. So a little bit about some of the community science that we have in Minnesota. It sounds like you guys, like I said, have a program already. But the Minnesota DNR, they do have some pretty robust monitoring programs that you can get involved with as well. So the Loon Watcher survey, that is one of them. They have two, and I have to remember which is which. Loon Watcher, I believe, is the entire summer. Yes, May through August. So the entire nesting season that the loons are here. Loon Watcher wants you to go out once a month, maybe even twice or more than that is great, and just count your loons. It's more of a behavioral thing, actually, than a count. They want to know about the phenology. They want to know, are they nesting? Did they have a successful hatch? How many chicks? Did the chicks make it to the end of the summer? That kind of thing. So you can volunteer on your lake. If you don't already have a Loon Watcher volunteer, you can volunteer. Yes? Are you a Loon Watcher?
No.
Okay.
Well, we do just the once in July.
Okay.
With the DNR. But, so when you're on a lake, we're kayaking, we see two loons, we see, well, one loon, then we go and see mom with the two babies. Then we can kayak around and we see another loon, and we're pretty sure it's the male.
Yep.
But it could be a third loon. How do you know? I mean, you can't, you just count what you see, right?
You really, yeah, it's hard to know, especially kind of mid-summer, because the loons are venturing outside of their nesting territory. In the early summer, usually they're pretty confined to their nesting site. Their home range is pretty comfortable. When the chicks hatch and they start to get bigger, they need to venture out into deeper waters and find more fish and teach them how to be loons, right? And that's when you get all the different pairs kind of coming into the middle of the lake, and they can kind of get mixed up a little bit, and that can be tough to determine which is which and which pair belongs to which chicks.
I mean,
yeah,
it could just be one pair that has moved. Okay?
Yeah, it's tough. One way, especially in Brainerd, that we kind of mitigate that problem is with the banding process. There is an independent biologist that was originally funded by the National Loon Center to do a loon banding project. And they, oh my goodness, they will go out typically in July and they will tag the loons. And that is basically the way that we figure out for sure which loon is which. Up here it might be a little bit different because they all look the same. You can't tell male from female. You can't tell one pair from another. So the banding is really helpful for us to be able to ensure that we're getting the correct loons. I don't know if I was going to talk about this naturally, but I'll talk about it now. So it's just a little piece of plastic. It's kind of like an oval shape. It's a little flatter than a regular tag that you would see on a bird. Loons have a little bit flatter legs than like ducks or other waterfowl. And they have, as you can see, different colors. I don't have as many examples on this string, but we do usually have like reds and greens and blues, yellows and oranges. I can pass this around, you guys can take a look. But it's just a little piece of plastic. We just wrap it around their leg, put a little bit of adhesive on it, and it stays pretty much forever. They don't fall off. It doesn't bother them. Sometimes they'll stick their foot out of the water. That's totally normal. They'll do that whether there's bands on it or not. But it's a super helpful way for us to tell the loons apart and to track them without being invasive with the surgical tracker. So there's that as well. Loon walker throughout the whole summer. Then you got, oh, I already said that. And I said that too. Then you got the monitoring program. So the loon monitoring program is a little bit more specialized. So there's a week kind of like in the beginning of July, I think, like end of June, beginning of July. It's 10 days, usually, and they want you to go out sometime during those 10 days onto your lake and do the count. That's the population study. These 6 index areas, Cook and Lake are on here, fun fact. These are 2 areas that they really want to know how many loons are there, because the DNR, these are tough places for the DNR to get. So they depend pretty heavily on volunteers to go out and get to those lakes. There's like 600 plus lakes that they want folks to be looking at, so that we know how many loons there really are. I mean, we estimate about 12,000, but especially up here, I was thinking about this on the drive up. I was like, how do people actually know on every lake? Because there's no way people can get to every single lake in the Boundary Waters, right? So they're looking for volunteers for that as well, and I can hook you up with that information if you're interested. But with that, I will continue. I didn't bring my egg with me because apparently there's other events happening at the Loon Center this weekend, so the egg got stolen from me, but I do have pictures, which is close enough. So after those 28 days of incubation on the nest, this is what the eggs look like. They're pretty, they're like this big-ish, if that helps. It probably doesn't, but think of like a chicken egg. They're usually about 3 to 5 times bigger than a chicken egg, and they're brown. They've got little black speckles on them to kind of blend in. After those 28 days, you get this cute, fuzzy little chick here. Do you have an egg? Is this real? Oh, no, it's not.
No.
Okay, good. Wow, look at that. Okay, well, I'll pass this around too, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Typically, they're a little bit bigger than that, but that's pretty good comparison there. The color is very much different from the eggs that we used to see, or we're used to seeing with the other types of birds in Minnesota. But once they hatch, you get that cute, fuzzy little chick there. This is about 2 days old, I think, is this little chick. Back riding, super cute. Easy way for the parents to keep track of the chick and make sure they don't get snatched by something under the water like a muskie or a snapping turtle. That happens pretty often. This loon is about 2 weeks old. You can see they're quite a bit bigger than this guy. Not riding on the back anymore. They're not quite fully grown. They still have that fluffy chick fur that we're used to seeing, but they are becoming more independent. Then at the end of the summer, this is what we call a juvenile loon. It is no longer a chick, but it is not quite an adult. They have a little bit different pattern that we're used to seeing. They don't have that striking red eye yet. Their feathers stay kind of a muted brownish gray color. And then they migrate just after the adults do. They stick around a little bit longer than the adults. But when they go down, they actually stay down in the Gulf or wherever they migrate to for 3 to 4 years because they're a very long-lived bird. They can live 20 to 30 years, so they need a little bit more time to get all their biology ready to go for mating and everything. So usually it takes them a couple of years to come back up for the first breeding season.
Do they return to the same lakes?
Typically, yep. The mated pairs will return to their same nesting site. The juveniles will try to return to as close to their natal lake as they can. So for example, if a loon was hatched on Crosslake, that chick may return to maybe the Brainerd Lakes area. They may not come all the way up here. They may not stay down in southern Minnesota, but they may try to stay in the general area where they were hatched.
When those eggs hatch, all that's left is the shell.
Mm-hmm.
Does that stay and decompose, or do they eat that, or is there nourishment in it, or?
They usually leave it. Sometimes the parents will like knock it into the water, but it's just food for other things after the chicks have hatched. The parents focus all their energy on the chicks, and they don't come back to the nest after the chicks have hatched. They go straight into the water and they don't return.
Did you say, Maddie, what the general life expectancy of a loon is?
Typically 20 to 30 years.
20 to 30.
Yep. The oldest loon that we know of, her name is Faye. She just turned 39. She lives in Michigan. That's the oldest that we know of. She's banded, so we for sure can track that. And then her pair member, his name is ABJ. He's actually 38, and they've been together for, I don't want to say how many years because I don't know, but a long time. They've been together for quite some time, which is pretty cool.
And the juveniles.
Yes, we'll ban the juveniles the very first summer so that we know exactly how old they are. Because like I said, when they don't return the first year after they migrate, so we know for sure if we ban them that summer that they were hatched, we know how old they are then. Yep.
How do you catch them?
Was that?
How do you catch them?
Ooh, it's kind of an ordeal. You go out in a fishing boat in the middle of the night, and you have a spotting scope, a musky net, and a little speaker to play the loon calls. You will play the loon calls in the dark so that the chicks come up, and then you shine the little spotlight on them to kind of stun them a little bit, and then you take the musky net and you scoop it up, bring it in the boat, and you got to wrap it up in a towel so it doesn't peck at you. It's a process. But it's pretty cool. You don't get to see something like that very often. Yeah. Okay, so really quick about behaviors, some behaviors that you might see on the water. I saw there's a nice little poster down there of some loon behaviors too, if you want more. But the big ones that we see quite often, this first one is called the hangover position, so they kind of hang their head over the edge of the nest if they feel threatened, if they feel like they need to make themselves small. That's how they do that, just kind of flatten themselves. And it's a little bit easier for them to slide right into the water if they need to. This one is the penguin dance. Loons are actually most closely related to penguins, believe it or not. If you look at this photo, you can kind of see it, right? And the sneezing, right? Yeah, there's lots of relations there. But we call it that just because that's what it looks like. But when you see that, pretty much all of the time, if you see that, well, I guess not all the time. Sometimes they'll just stretch their wings. But you'll know that this is meaning something different if they use that yodel call that I talked about earlier, so that territorial defense call. If they do that and the penguin dance, they're trying to tell you something. They want you to back up. They're trying to make themselves look big and scary so that you get the picture that you don't want to fight this bird. The foot waggle, I talked about that with the bands. You can see that this chick does not have bands, so they're going to do that regardless. It doesn't bother them at all. This is just their way of kind of thermoregulating. In the water and in the air, it's kind of like they're half and half. It's like when we stick our foot out of the covers at night, you know. That's kind of the best way to describe that. And then peering. Loons are visual predators. They depend on clear water to be able to hunt. So they will kind of stick their head underwater like they're snorkeling. That's how they look for their fish that they're going to catch. And then they'll dive and go get it. Social gatherings in August and September. We're going to start seeing that pretty soon. Groups of loons will come together because there's nothing to be territorial about. You can have groups of loons as small as 5 or as big as 150, depending on the size of your lake. So that's pretty common.
On the gatherings, is that just males, male, female?
Both, yep.
Okay.
Typically the juveniles will come together on their own after the males and the females have left. But the males and females, like once nesting season is over, there's nothing to be conflicting about them.
And then I was told, I heard the males left before.
They do, yep.
Okay.
Yep, the males will go first, then the females will go, and then the juveniles will stay back as long as they can to make sure they're big and strong enough to make the journey down.
How long does it take them to get, say, to the Gulf of Mexico from here?
It depends. If they're coming from here, it could probably be a couple of days if they go really fast. They can fly 75 miles an hour. We've tracked them going like 670 miles in one day. Sometimes they'll stop on freshwater lakes just to hang out for a little bit, but then they'll continue their journey pretty quick. Some other things that you'll see during the pre-migration season is molting. So they actually change their feather color over the winter. Just like our hair and fingernails and skin and everything gets kind of worn out. All that swimming and diving in the summer really wears out their feathers, so they need to grow in a new set. So that's something that you'll see pretty often. They're not sick or anything. That's just a normal part of their year. Just some examples of the juvenile. You can see is this one, and then the adult that's kind of started their molting process. Pretty far along actually is this one here. Like I said, loons are visual hunters, so they are eating mostly fish. Sometimes they'll eat smaller aquatic critters like crayfish and worms and things like that, but it's mostly fish. Cisco is a key species for them. It's a really high calorie, fatty fish that helps them gain a lot of energy before they go down to the Gulf. Okay, so some not super fun stuff to talk about, but still very important. Some of the threats that we are seeing to our loons right now, disease is one that we don't experience a lot of in Minnesota. It's mostly in the Great Lakes when the loons are gathering during migration. But that is one thing that we worry about with botulism and things like that. The human disturbance, lead poisoning, water quality, those are all the big things that we are seeing, particularly in central Minnesota. Up here it might be a little bit different. You guys might have issues like lead poisoning is for sure one, but it may not be as prominent as maybe, I don't know, I'm looking at this list. Water quality is probably pretty good up here, yeah. Human disturbance is probably minimal. Is that fair to say? Compared to the, like Crosslake, probably pretty minimal. Mercury, you know, no matter where in Minnesota, that's going to be an issue, so that could be something as well. Disease might be a thing.
Does the mercury come from fish?
The mercury, yes. So it's, the word that we use is bioaccumulation. So the small things that have, you know, they pull in most of the mercury, and then the bigger things that eat more small things, and the bigger things that eat those things, and then the loons eat the big fish, right, with a lot of mercury in them. Just like us, when we pull a fish out of the water, they recommend a certain amount because we don't want to consume more mercury than we can, right? So yes, it is from the fish.
As far as lead poisoning, I heard over the radio that 25% of loon deaths result from lead. Is that about right?
That is pretty accurate. Yep, I think I have a slide about that pretty soon, but 25% annually in the United States is about accurate for the lead poisoning stat. From those DNR loon monitoring programs and the Loon Watcher Survey, they have found that our 12,000 loons in Minnesota are fairly stable. The adult population is doing pretty good. Juveniles have had a slight downtick recently. Loons are such a long-lived bird that we want to make sure we have at least 10 plus years of data before we actually say loons are disappearing. But as I said with this group of threats here, we're kind of in a perfect storm. All of these things happening at once is going to create some problems for the loons. So if we get out ahead of it, I don't know what just happened. If we get out ahead of it, we should be able to put a stop to that that downtick in the juveniles. So I can speed through this because it sounds like I would assume up here you guys don't have to deal with quite as many of these things, but if you were to visit other places in the state, just some things to be conscious about. Human disturbance, those wake boats and other fishing boats and everything like that. Obviously you can risk hitting the loons on the surface of the water. You can also displace the chicks from the parents, and then that erosion factor as well. Of course, loss of habitat is huge with those cabins and lake houses and, you know, the riprap shorelines tearing all the natural plants out so that you can have a nice view of the lake. Of course, we want that, but we also want the wildlife to have somewhere to live too. Not a lot of AIS up here, yeah? Maybe?
It's here. Yeah.
It's here?
Yeah.
Like zebra mussels, I would assume are probably here. Do you guys have to deal with?
No, zebra mussels aren't. We don't have a lot of calcium in the water.
Oh, good. What are you mostly dealing with up here? Milfoils?
Those eat crayfish.
Oh, sure.
And there's another one. There's a couple on staff.
Spiny water flea.
Thank you. That's all.
Oh, spiny water flea, that's a big one.
That's
For sure.
awesome.
Cool. Well, not cool, but good to know that you don't have things like zebra mussels, right? That's a huge
Well, I
thing you don't want
can't
to
speak
deal
to
with.
everywhere, but at least the ones I know, at least central mid-trail.
Sure. Okay. Good to know. Interesting. Well, as you can imagine, super disruptive to the ecosystem. We don't enjoy those in our lakes at all. Lead fishing tackle, you said that totally right. It was about 20 to 25% of all the loon mortality in Minnesota, not Minnesota, in the United States is due to lead poisoning. So those little, I don't have physical examples with me, but those little split shots, those little weights that you put on your line, they swallow those. They'll dive down to the bottom of the lake, pick up those little pebbles, store them in their gizzards so that they can grind up fish. The lead is super soluble and it dissolves super easily, so that ends up in their bloodstream within a couple of hours of consuming a fish. Not a good way to go, super painful, super slow, they get lethargic, they can't swim in a straight line, you'll see them swimming around in circles, they'll kind of like lean their head over it, it won't look very comfortable. Water quality is not huge up here. You guys have very natural shorelines, which is awesome. The big thing that we worry about in the Brainerd Lakes area is phosphorus coming from fertilizers and pesticides and things like that. The chloride from road and sidewalk salt, that's another one. The chemical balance of the lake is super, super, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Someone help me. Fragile. That's a good word. Fragile is a good word for it. It doesn't take a lot to alter the chemical balance of your lake. So, and the loons depend on, like I said earlier, that clear lake. So if you have a lot of algae growing in the water, that is not going to be very productive for the loons. So really quick. Sure, shoreline. I'm wearing a cute shirt. You pointed it out earlier. It's super fun. Just some things to remember when we're on the water, because, like I said, the loons were here first, right? 56 million years first. So just some ways for us to remember how to share the lake and the shoreline with them. Make sure that they get the right of way, if you will. Specifically with safe boating, if you're on the water, whether it's a wake boat, a fishing boat, a pontoon, even a paddleboard or a kayak, keeping a good distance. You want to stay at least 200 feet away. We tend to like the Minnesota wilds most of the time in Minnesota. So if you are a hockey fan, 200 feet is about the length of an NHL hockey rink. So that's a good rule of thumb if you're on the water, to keep an eye out for 200 feet between yourself and the wildlife. Fishing when safe, I have a whole slide on that I will cover. Preventing those aquatic invasive species. Sounds like you're doing a pretty good job of that. And landscaping. So if you do have a cabin or a lake house on the water, there's some good ways that you can keep the landscape natural and loon friendly, which I can talk about right here. So it's really just supporting a natural shoreline, keeping that native vegetation there, planting existing species that are already there and adding to that is also good. Reducing fertilizer use, I can't imagine that is a huge issue up here, but if you do have to fertilize, make sure you're doing that in a safe way without phosphorus-based fertilizer. Keeping your septic maintained, that's a big one. Not one that people think of very often. But yeah, just keeping even a small space on your shoreline that's dedicated to the natural plants, dedicated to just letting nature do its thing will make all the difference. Probably don't have issues with geese, but it prevents geese and other things. That's a kind of a selling point in Brainerd. You don't want geese on your lawn? Plant native plants. Keeps the shoreline in place too. You can see the roots in the native plants are significantly longer than like the Kentucky bluegrass. So that's going to hold your shoreline in place too with erosion. Responsible recreation, again, keeping 200 feet away from the loons, being mindful of where the loons are nesting, especially when you're recreating on the water.
A question just on that. So, you know, we have less boater population than in the Brainerd area. I mean, do they have, are there active programs just for educating people on these things? And especially, I think, with the new licensure requirements, are they requiring, is this part of that, you know, licensure to operate a boat, to give them training on responsible, because, you know, a lot of people just don't know this.
Yeah.
They really don't.
Yeah, that is a good point that we are working on actually. So when they came out with all those new voter registration requirements, we were like, we got to get on that. Because if they're going to require all these people to take that test, we need to teach them this. So yes, that is a great point. We are slowly but surely trying to get that curriculum in there too. Good question.
What says makes the loons anxious?
Yes.
A boat can do, what happens if the loon is anxious?
If you, let's give an example here. If you were maybe tubing or swimming in the lake, and all of a sudden, so the analogy is that you're a loon chick swimming in the lake, and all of a sudden the boat that you were with totally leaves you and strands you in the middle of the water, and then there's wake boats and jet skis coming by you. Will that make you anxious? I would hope so. So if you're a loon chick and your parents got separated from you because the waves separated you, you're just a little chick and you got swept away, and all of a sudden a wake boat or a jet ski comes by, The chicks can't dive because they're so fluffy. They can't go underwater like the adults can.
Okay.
So they're at even greater risk. So the parents are freaking out because they don't want to get hit, and they're freaking out because their chicks don't want to get hit. And they're trying to do what they can to protect them.
Their territory.
Right. Exactly.
You said once they hatch and they can swim, they don't go back to the nest.
They don't go back to the nest. So they are just out in the middle of the lake.
Do they sleep at night, or are they constantly sleep floating? Or
They do, yeah. So loons actually, they're more nappers than they are full night sleepers. So they'll sleep for like 30-minute increments, and they'll just kind of like rest their head on the back of their body, and the chicks will sleep on the parents, and they'll just kind of float around and sleep. So they don't go back to land at all. So they got to worry about the boats 24/7. That would make me anxious if I were a loon. Good question. Clean, drain, dry. That's an easy one. Good way to keep all the zebra mussels and stuff out of the water. Properly disposing bait is a big one that not a lot of people think about. Night crawlers, leeches, minnows, no matter what it is, don't dump it in the water. Obviously, hopefully that's an obvious thing. That goes in the trash every time. Decontamination stations. Are there a lot of decontamination stations up here?
Most of the,
one that I know of.
well, Rockwood has one for sure, Midtrail, I think Sag, you know what,
And
the
one-
Voyager out there has a.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good.
And one in Grand Prairie.
I'm sure there's more.
Perfect.
Display others.
Excellent. Well, that's good. Yeah. So they're all free. So if they're around, that's always a resource for you to use. Or just let your boat dry for the required amount of time.
If you're in a canoe that you're carrying upside down, it's not a problem.
It depends on what the species is that you're trying not to move. Zebra mussels, it doesn't matter what goes in the water, that all has to be decontaminated. If you're portaging a canoe up here, I don't think that's a problem. If it's like milfoil and stuff, that's something that you want to be a little more diligent about, I think. But canoes, portaging, I don't think that's a problem. Good questions. Real quick about fishing loon safe. Does anybody know about the Get the Let Out program?
We have some here.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Okay, wonderful. So the Get the Let Out program, they are coordinated by the Pollution Control Agency, and they use the loon kind of as a champion for that, obviously. But they are encouraging people to switch from lead tackle to non-lead tackle. In Minnesota, there is no legislation that has outlawed fishing tackle. The split shot, not the split shot, buckshot.
Yeah.
Buckshot, yeah. That's been outlawed, but fishing tackle we're still working on that. So it's up to us to figure out how to get that through and switch that. But yeah, I have an example of, I'm blinding myself. I can pass this around. Lindy tackle, if you're familiar with Lindy, they have, they have a new campaign that they have started with us to be completely lead-free in all of their manufacturing by 2027. So Lindy, Northland Tackle in Bemidji also has a lead-free line, and several others in Minnesota. They are getting to a point where they can be completely lead-free, which is super awesome.
How about all the states where they migrate to?
See, that's the other thing, is because they go to different places down in the ocean, things could be different. There are other states where the loons live, like in northeastern United States.
These other metal substitutes in saltwater aren't as effective.
This is true. I guess I don't know how much they're affected down in the Gulf. I think typically our issues are in the States, like in Minnesota. I don't think we have numbers for the Gulf or for the ocean in general. Could be because there's just so much more surface area to cover. But I guess I don't have an answer for that one. That's a good question. But yeah, it is a problem going from, maybe the loons over in the Northeast that do have lead banned going to other states and down to the Gulf. And they're still affected by that too. Yeah. Good questions. Okay. I'm gonna skip that. Maybe I'll come back to it. So again, just with the other types of metals, they have, Lindy in particular has like I don't know what all the different metals are that they put into it, but it's not just straight tungsten or it's not straight bismuth. They have a combination of metals that make it so that it's as effective as lead and it costs just the same, which is awesome. In 2025, I would hope that they've gotten that figured out. So if you're interested, there is a little QR code and there's a website on the Get the Lead Out site, or a link on the Get the Lead Out site to hundreds of vendors that sell non-lead tackle.
And several here on the trail for sure, so
Excellent, that's awesome. If they don't, if you go in there and you say, I want to buy lead-free tackle from you, and they say, oh, we don't have it, and say, oh, that's a bummer, you should really have that. If more people say that, then they're going to start carrying it.
Stores, it doesn't seem to be very prevalent.
yeah, Bucks is not so prevalent.
Okay.
I mean, like Bass Pro or West.
Oh yeah, Bass Pro is a problem. We're getting to them.
There's not much concern there.
In the smaller ones? Or the large
In the
ones?
large stores, you almost don't see lead-free in there.
Yeah, typically you see like in the winter they'll have the tungsten ones, but just for ice fishing, but that's not for the purpose of getting rid of lead.
Walmart, Kmart, cheap stores, they'll sell whatever's cheapest. now.
Exactly.
Good.
Yep. So we're trying to get to as many consumers as possible, but the manufacturers is where we're trying to get to the most. Like Lindy, wherever the Lindy one went, and Northland and other manufacturers, so that we can get it at the source. So that Walmart has no choice but to buy from the lead-free consumers or manufacturers.
But the state can pass something and then they require to sell it in Minnesota.
Right, that would be the ideal solution, is to get that act together. They're working on it. Okay, so some other community science, not necessarily like statewide, but nationwide, things that if you're into birds or loons or other wildlife, eBird is a really cool one that you can use to submit your loon sightings, and that's really helpful with tracking when they're migrating, because it's nationwide and worldwide, I believe, actually. It helps us see when they're returning to Minnesota, where they're going in the winter, which is super fun. iNaturalist is another one. Hopefully most people know about iNaturalist. That's not just birds, but other mammals, insects, plants, everything. Also helpful for migration and wintering. Just helps us see like, oh, a loon popped up here, or a loon popped up here. If you're curious about Ancestry.com for birds, basically is what this is. The Bird Genoscape Project, they take little samples of feathers and they can see what the genetic makeup is of that bird. So if it came from Minnesota or if it came from maybe an entirely different state or country, that's pretty interesting to see. Maybe they came all the way up from Alaska. Oh wow, that was fast. I guess that's it. Okay, questions about anything. I will take all questions, yeah.
You said they were about 65 million years old.
55.
50.
Close enough.
Have they changed?
Not a whole lot.
Were they pretty much the same then as now?
Well, if you think about how there's only 5 species of loon after 55 million years, that's pretty remarkable that they haven't evolved past those 5 species. So they haven't changed a whole lot. Maybe physically, depending on their geographic location, they may have adapted some other things, but generally they're pretty much the same bird that they were 55 million years ago. Yeah.
Things. Understand that if diving, they're able to compress their lungs in order to get down deeper.
Yes, they can dive at least 250 feet. We don't quite know if they can dive further than that. In Minnesota, that doesn't happen very often because we don't have any lakes that are 250 feet deep. But over in the Great Lakes and in the ocean, they're doing that quite a bit to get down to the bottom and get crustaceans and stuff. But they do, yes, they compress everything. They're pressurized when they go down there and they can decompress.
Because of their shape and the location of their feet, they need a runway to take off.
Yes.
So somewhere I picked up that if they would happen to land on a wet pavement, they may not be able to take off.
Yes, you're totally right. So sometimes what happens during migration, if loons are flying over a particularly rainy state, and there happens to be like a parking lot of some kind that gets wet from rain or whatever, they may mistake that for a lake and they may try to land on it to take a break and then get back up. They can't get back up if they land on land. They have to be on a certain amount of water. Sometimes they need up to 1/4 of a mile to get back up in the air. Because they're so heavy and their legs are where they are, they need a runway, as you said, to get back up into the air. So if they end up on land, that's when people like us get called and we have to go bring them to water because they mistook the pavement for a lake that's not there. Happens more often than you think, yeah.
If the first clutch fails, do they ever reclutch?
Sometimes, yeah, typically they have 2 chances during the summer. Usually the first one is like early May to early June is the first chance, and then a couple weeks after that they can go as close to like mid-June as they can. I think the latest pair that we had on the Crosslake, or the whitefish chain where Crosslake is, I think the chicks hatched like the 4th of July, and they were able to fledge from there. Any later than that, and it gets a little bit tricky. If it gets cold too early, then they may not be able to make it. Good question.
Are eagles the biggest predator?
Yes. Yep. Besides humans, eagles are the biggest thing that loons have to worry about. That's the only bird that's brave enough to take on a loon. Yeah.
Is there a difference of daytime and nighttime predators? And I'm thinking that we're just aware that there's like an evening routine of flying over between a couple lakes.
Sure.
What is that about?
Yeah, that'll typically happen. Like I said, kind of towards the beginning, sometimes the pairs will split and they will go from one, like their whole lake to a neighboring lake. Whether it's for fish or just to expand territory, whatever it may be. Usually it's for foraging so they can bring back fish for the chicks. Yeah, sometimes usually that'll happen during the evening or dawn hours. That's when you'll hear those whales going back and forth, because that's when they're locating. Yep.
And they don't necessarily sleep at night, but they're not probably hunting because you said they're visual hunters.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, they do hunt at night. Whether they can do it very well is questionable, but they don't sleep through the night. They're
Some full moon nights.
Right, yeah. Sometimes they will. But generally they're just keeping their territory established is mostly what's happening. Yeah. Other questions? I'm going to stick around for a little bit, so if you want to talk to me.
You were called sometimes to get a bird that landed in a parking lot or something.
Yeah.
Relocate them. What other kind of calls do you deal with?
That's a great question. So the Loon Center, we are not equipped to rescue loons. We are not equipped to rehabilitate loons. We often get calls about loons that may have lead poisoning, loons that, maybe they had chicks and then they don't. People are like, what happened to the chicks? Did they get eaten by something? Did they get hit by a boat? So it's most of the time it's just answering questions about people's loons on their lake, because they get attached and they name them and they want to know about their loons. So they call us for questions. Sometimes we will get questions about rescues, and then we would call like the DNR or someone that is more equipped to handle something like that. Eventually we will be, but right now you'd be sending me out there, and I could do it, but it wouldn't be the best.
We've had some years where the water's really high, or
Yeah.
ice out is really late or something. Is there anything that lake associations can do to think about providing nesting in that situation, or do you just trust that a second hatch would be a better way to?
Yeah, typically in like a short turnaround like that, we try to just let nature do its thing. Some years are bad years. Like last year we had literal tornadoes on Crosslake, so we lost 90% of our chicks. And sometimes that's just what happens, and you just have to try again next year.
It's gone for 50 million years. So.
Right. They've survived this long. They'll survive one drought.
Humans for a lot of that. That's the problem.
Yeah, but if it's a consistent thing, then maybe we'd have to step in that case. Good questions. Okay. I don't want to hold you all hostage, so I will stick around. I do have resources. I have a newsletter sign up if you want to learn more about the Loon Center and get consistent updates from us about the building and everything. I have that. There's stuff up front. If you don't want to come talk to me, if I'm scary, you can grab stuff from the back and just beeline out the door. So,
Thank you.
of course.